What are the signs and signals to recognize that it's anticipatory grief?
What does healthy grieving actually look like?
Have the courage to ask for help and support.
Welcome to the Empowered Elder Podcast.
Grief is an experience that everyone will encounter. However, it is also one of the most misunderstood, avoided, and isolating aspects of being human. We are rarely taught how to grieve, how to support someone in grief, or how loss continues to influence us throughout our lives.
And grief doesn't only come after death. It can follow life transitions, changes in health, caregiving roles, aging, and even moments of growth. Especially for older adults and caregivers, grief often shows up quietly, layered, complex, and deeply personal.
And yet, despite how universal grief is, so many people feel unprepared to face it. In fact, according to the Conversation Project, more than 90% of people believe it's important to talk about end-of-life wishes, but fewer than 30% have actually had those conversations. That silence often leaves individuals and families navigating loss without clarity, language, or support.
We see the impact of that silence most clearly at the end of life. According to the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, hospice care significantly improves comfort, emotional well-being, and support for both patients and families, yet many people are referred to hospice far later than they could be, sometimes only in the final days, instead of months when care and connection could make the greatest difference.
All of this is a powerful reminder that grief isn't something to fix or rush through. It's a natural human response, one that deserves care, compassion, and community. And that's exactly what today's conversation is about, changing how we understand grief and how we show up for ourselves and one another through it.
We're honored to be joined by Jen Flaum, licensed clinical social worker and executive director of HeartLight Center. Jen brings over 15 years of experience supporting individuals and families through grief, loss, hospice, and end-of-life journeys, combining clinical expertise with deep empathy and mission-driven leadership.
Through her work, Jen helps normalize grief, open meaningful conversations, and remind people that healing doesn't happen alone. It happens through presence, support, and connection.
This is a powerful conversation about grief across the lifespan, intergenerational healing, and finding meaning after loss. Let's dive in.
So how did the HeartLight Center come to be and get to where it is now?
So HeartLight Center was really a dream of Horan and McConaty Funeral Home. There were some key players involved for a really long time. John Horan's mom, Valerie, took phone calls after people had experienced a loss. And her vision was that every funeral home would have a candle in the window and a rocking chair in the corner. So she really recognized the need for people to talk and for somebody to listen, as simple as that sounds. And then Jennifer McBride also lost her dad. And in the Denver community at that time, recognized there was really nowhere for adults to go. Hospice programs offer grief support for families that they serve, and some programs offer more for the community, but there wasn't a centralized place in Denver. And so it was with the support of Horan and McConaty Funeral Home and the vision of Jennifer and Valerie and a board of directors that then formed HeartLight as a separate 501c3 nonprofit. And then for many years, it really was grief support groups and some educational programming that we were able to offer at HeartLight Center. And as COVID did for many organizations and businesses in 2020, HeartLight really had to adjust. When your offering is around being in community and in person together, and then all of a sudden we couldn't, as we all remember, HeartLight started offering virtual programs. And it was at that time that we recognized the need for peer support existed really across the country. We had people that would log in and find our groups from various places around the United States, and now in starting to see people log in from other countries. And so we were able to really reimagine how we could offer grief support and lean into our mission, which is to provide meaningful and accessible grief support and education. So been able to adjust and find incredible facilitators and community members, professionals who want to be a part of something bigger and offer what they can in the terms of grief support. So we've grown exponentially, but very grassroots in terms of finding good people and building communities in a way that's meaningful in each place.
And what was your path and that helped you find the HeartLight Center?
So I was a social worker in hospice care and got to know HeartLight Center. Jennifer at the time did a lot of outreach to the hospice communities. And when you meet with families who are anticipating a death loss, they're already grieving. And that anticipatory grief in the anticipation for what will life look like after this loss occurs. So when I met Jennifer, I found HeartLight Center to be really helpful in a couple of ways. One, it was a place that I could refer families to and know that there was somewhere that they could go and a community that already existed. Just telling people that, letting them know in anticipation, there's a place for you, even if they don't go, can be really meaningful because that can start to eliminate the concept of I'm alone in this. Because it feels like you're alone, but you don't necessarily have to be. And there are other people that understand. And there's a community that's already built that you're welcome to come to. So I would send people to HeartLight Center. And then as a professional, I found myself in a space where HeartLight Center helped to educate me about grief and loss. It also helped to educate me about funeral service and the value of ceremony and ritual, the cultural considerations around how to support people at time of death and through those ceremonies and rituals. And so I leaned in. I went to as many events as I could. I contacted HeartLight when I needed support. I contacted HeartLight when my team that I was leading needed support. And so it was really a beautiful honor when Jennifer and I realized that maybe she was ready to retire and it was a place that I could come to start to lead.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. How has this impacted you personally in your path?
That's a great question. Grief and loss as a child, I never didn't know life without it. And so people will often ask, how do you do what you do? Or why would you do this? And for a long time, I'd make up answers. And then I realized the answer is it never occurred to me not to. And by nature, I find myself that it's a natural place for me to be supporting people or really holding space when things feel hard or raw or vulnerable to the point where it's almost hard for me to have surface level conversations. So what end-of-life care did for me, what HeartLight Center has done for me is it really is a space where people enter and all of the other stuff goes away. But we can show up in true human form and without any veils or niceties. There's really no pretending. We just get to be honest about what's happening. And that honesty, I think in its purest form, even if it's sad or hard or comes with fear or anger, sometimes joy and transformation, that honesty feels so genuine to me. And so it's a place that feels very natural and quite an honor to be able to be with people in some of the most real moments that we can be in and explore and be curious about what's happening.
And to let families know that it's okay to let go and it's okay to say goodbye and to be. Not everybody can be comfortable in that space. So that is a gift for sure that you're able to do that and feel comfortable and to be with those families at those times or even after loss and to be present for that. That's an amazing gift.
Yeah. It's also such an incredible honor. So the way that HeartLight is structured is that most all of our groups and programs are led by volunteers. And in a world where we hear every day about all of the bad things that are happening, I honestly just get to witness people showing up for people in the most authentic and caring ways. And we have over 80 volunteers this year that have facilitated programs, helped with fundraising, and been a part of HeartLight as a whole. And so, I mean, that just fills my soul to the point where I don't understand. My world is not living in things that are negative. It's really living in a space where I get to see the good in everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even when there's grief, there's moments of beauty,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why is it especially important to talk openly about grief?
There's a lot of reasons. I think what research tells us, and it's been proven around post-traumatic stress specifically, is that when people feel seen, heard, and validated, that decreases the chances that they will develop complicated grief or post-traumatic stress symptoms. And when grief is something that touches all of us, and oftentimes it can be surprising or hard to recognize. And so normalizing the conversation or being open to the conversation, we tell people, we see you, we hear you, we validate what's happening. It also creates a culture where we don't have to search for a net because we know that it's there. And when we're grieving, even as working in this space, we will tell each other, sometimes in a funny way, but talking to another grief professional, hey, I got to tell you, you're grieving. And even when you work in it every single day, you think, oh my gosh, that's what that is. I didn't even think about that. I have worked with colleagues who, even when we go through our own losses, will say, don't worry, I'm going to be here with the person I'm losing, but I'll still check emails. And we do this every single day.
It's such an American thing.
Right.
And then we have to tell each other, mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you what you would tell me. Please don't check your emails. And so it's something that even when we talk, again, for me, I do it every day, we still have to remind each other, this is what's happening, because it's something that can feel so unfamiliar when we are grieving.
Well, and I think that there's grief every day, whether there's truly a loss, because I think any amount of change could throw you into a tailspin of some sort, right? Or relationships change and you're grieving what used to be and not necessarily paying attention to what is. So for me, grief is an opportunity to be aware of what you're feeling and acknowledging that yourself too, mm-hmm. before somebody else can help you with it.
Mm-hmm. Right? Any transition,
right,
mm-hmm. can involve, and usually does involve, grief. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think about grief very concretely, like grief is sad. And really it's, our human experience is all of the emotions, and grief can touch all of the emotions. It can be transformative. And it can be anger, and it can be, it's really holding two things at once, that duality piece, even if something is what we plan to be a very positive transition or change, can still hold something that feels difficult and that we'll miss.
Well, and it's our reality, mm-hmm. right? None of us get out of the world alive. Mm. So understanding that we need to support one another and how to do that successfully is an important element, mm-hmm. right? So the HeartLight Center provides that kind of basis. How does reframing grief as a natural human experience, rather than something to fix or rush, change how people move through their loss that they're experiencing?
I like to... there are many metaphors, and metaphors can be really important with grief. But I think about grief as, just because I think it's a cute way to think about it, like a little guy that lives inside of you. I've given kids the little fuzzy balls. I don't know if you remember, and they had little googly eyes on them and the little feet.
Yeah.
So when I talk to kids about grief, and then maybe adults now too, I think grief is like one of those little fuzzy guys. And if we don't tend to our grief and pay attention to it and acknowledge it in whatever way that needs to be done for each individual person, it's kind of like it picks up weights and it just gets stronger and it doesn't go away. And so we might think that we have things in their place, but the more we resist something, the stronger it gets. And so I heard another metaphor even this morning about if you build a brand new house and there's a puddle outside and maybe you landscape over it, you put the foundation over it, the puddle still stays there. And eventually the puddle will come in. And it gets bigger. And so not resisting something that is difficult, but leaning into it and working through it will help make it less strong.
I think people have this perception, like maybe I'm grieving the wrong way, or I'm not doing what I should be. Should I be crying all the time? Should I be laughing? How should I grieve? I'm still working. I'm still checking emails. I'm still functioning. I'm still able to care for everybody. Am I grieving right? I mean, would you say that there's a right or wrong way, or what does healthy grieving actually look like?
So sometimes you'll see the phrase, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. And on its surface, that's true. But that's also telling us we all grieve very differently. And so it's not right or wrong to laugh or to have one emotion over another, or one that's stronger, or to maybe actually be okay and feeling like, I'm okay. Am I doing this thing wrong? Should I be more reflective? Should I be more upset? When grief, though, becomes something that is making it so that it's hard to live in our day-to-day, or when we're feeling symptoms of depression, we're wanting to harm ourselves or somebody else, when our coping becomes something that's leading into harmful habits, or habits that don't support a healthy way or a positive transition, then that's when additional help could be necessary. And so when it comes to how you're feeling, there's really no right or wrong way to feel. What we do with that, though, is we want to equip people with ways that they can cope in a healthy way for themselves and for others.
Why does grief sometimes show up months or years later? What is that all about?
Sometimes, most always.
Yeah.
So when we think about a loss, and I think, Nicole, this is part of your question too, is sometimes I'll hear people say, gosh, when this person died, it kind of just was. And I was sad and I went to the funeral, and then about a couple months later, I was actually okay. And when another person died, maybe they weren't even, maybe it was mom that died, and actually we adjusted to that pretty normally, but then a coworker died, and that was something that was really difficult for somebody. In a situation like that, people can feel maybe even guilt. Gosh, I'm more upset that my friend died than I was my mom. And what's happening? So there's this concept called time and space, and really thinking about how much does my self-image overlap with this other person. And so when we think about who we are and how close we are to that person, that can help us understand why we would maybe grieve somebody differently. We were as ready as we can. We were prepared for mom to die. She was older. This was something that is a natural progression of life. We'd had many years of memories together. And while I was grieving, I maybe wasn't as upset when somebody else passes. And so knowing that what this person means to me, this relationship at this point in time, can lead us to grieve differently. So then what's happening is our brains are responding to that. And three things are happening for us. One is what's happening with our thoughts. Two is what's happening with our emotions. The third is what's happening with our neurobiology in our brain. And to expect that all of those things can happen in a 1 month, 3 month, 6 months, or 12-month period of time is too much for us. If we've had a relationship with somebody for 50 years, of course it's going to take a year or 2 or 5. If we've lived with them, a partner or a spouse or a work colleague, we've worked together for 25 years, all of these things have to happen physiologically, for our brains to believe even that something has happened, not let alone our hearts and our minds. So it takes time and intention for those close losses.
And you said earlier, your counterparts might see something in you and point out that you're grieving. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I guess that is what I'm going through. What are the signs that you're grieving? And what does our audience need to kind of be aware of to tie that whatever emotion or action to their grieving process?
It's a great question. So the first thing is that we've a loss or transition. Anytime we've had, the most obvious is if somebody dies, but also other transitions. So my most recent, I'll just tell you, was a change kind of in my role at work. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And then one day I thought, am I grieving that I'm not facilitating as many programs as I was because my role has shifted a little bit? And some of those signs were dis-ease. If we aren't feeling as healthy physically, that's always a question I like to encourage people, or something I like to encourage people to share with their physicians if they've just been through a transition or a loss, because some of those things can bubble up physically. The other thing that can come up is just if we feel unsettled. The obvious things are if we're having large emotional responses to things. People will often talk about crying in the grocery store, or I thought things were okay, and then I got to the spaghetti aisle and I erupted in tears. So those are the more obvious signs that we're grieving something. And when that happens, I encourage people and ourselves to just hold ourselves with tenderness. It's okay to cry in front of the spaghetti. Other people might feel uncomfortable, but it's not our jobs to make other people feel comfortable when we're experiencing grief. And so the larger emotions, physical changes in sleep habits, eating habits, and then just being open and honest with yourself during those transitions or those losses to be aware of what's happening around us.
Do you think that grief could show up differently when you have an older adult versus maybe a younger person? And what does that distinction look like, the difference between older adults and younger, if there is one?
Yeah, I think there is one in general. For at different developmental times in our lives, we respond to grief and loss typically based off those developmental periods. So with younger kids or with teenagers, younger adults. But then as we age, I think a couple of things happen. We have more experience to draw upon. Maybe that's a wisdom, or we're kind of transitioning into a life where, there's a point in midlife where the first half of our lives we're spending ramping up and building that. Richard Rohr talks about this, the first half of life and the second half of life. We're building that container so that of all the things to meet our basic needs, and we're in that creative process. Then in the second half of life, we have opportunity to sink in a little bit deeper to our experiences, our emotions. Wisdom comes into play, but also we're in some ways undoing some things. And so that shift in priority or day-to-day experience can lend itself to how we grieve differently. The other thing that happens as we age and in the later part of our life is we have been having more and more transitions and experiencing more and more loss. And just like with a lot of things, the more we experience something, in some ways, the more we are able to develop coping mechanisms or a deeper understanding of what's happened. So it's not a guarantee that if you're older, you will grieve in one way, and if you're younger, you will grieve in another. But typically what we see across our lifespans is that we have different perspectives and different experiences the older we are, to be able to draw upon different coping mechanisms.
Because if somebody's younger, they might not have the ability to reach out to anybody or to know what's going on with those feelings or emotions. So I could see how that might be. Maybe an adult in their lives could help guide them to seek out somebody to talk to or understand what they're going through, because what are these feelings that I'm having? I've never experienced that before, right?
Yeah, and what we know, kids or young adults are incredible teachers. I think everybody has this ability to be a teacher and a learner, regardless of age.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you actually talk to children, the ability to simplify grief becomes much more clear. I think children's books, even for adults who are grieving, it's the number one thing I recommend. Is there's a lot of books out there, but especially in that first period of time after we've experienced a loss or during transitions, often children's books can simplify things for us in a way that feel more palpable than something a little bit more clinical or, a 200-page novel.
Sure.
That it's hard to digest.
A thesis or a dissertation.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
You mentioned before anticipatory grief. What are the signs and signals to recognize that it's anticipatory grief and to give yourself some care around that rather than just dismissing it?
I think sometimes when we're experiencing anticipatory grief, it's just grief in a different way. So for example, if we're anticipating a transition, I'm going to have to downsize my home, is one that's very common. And there, again, it's holding both of those things that are happening at the same time. I know I need to do this. It's the right thing to do. I'm not going to do this in times of a crisis. I'm going to plan for it. But you're still anticipating and expecting and thinking about what it's going to be like to leave the home that you built or raised a family in or have all these memories in. And so when we're anticipating a transition or anticipating somebody who's ill, part of it is allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling in that moment. And there can be a lot of power in presence. So I was working with somebody this weekend who was anticipating the aging parents, and she was chopping it up into a kind of a 5-year plan. And I said, think smaller. Yeah, let's think smaller. What do we need to think about for today and then maybe a month from now or in these quarters? Because when we're anticipating, and there's all these things that could potentially happen. So grounding ourselves to here and now, and then we're able to think more clearly and strategically in terms of a longer term schedule or plan.
That makes sense, because I think we get lost in the story of our mind.
Yes.
Right. We're telling ourselves the story about what is going to happen, what could happen. Oh my gosh. And getting lost down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. And then you have to make plans for like 500 scenarios.
Right.
And it's so helpful. And I love this podcast because, as you guys were explaining, to be able to anticipate and respond versus be surprised and react we have some ability to influence outcomes in a space when we're planning and thinking about things. But also we like to think we have so much more power than we do because
Control freak much? Well,
yeah, and a lot of things, like, but I planned for this and this happened, and that would be life,
like take a drink. I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, I was going to be sad on Tuesday because I was going to work on Wednesday.
It doesn't fit into the schedule,
and that's
right?
not working for me. So,
it didn't fit my schedule. I time blocked that.
Right,
exactly.
Right. Back to like, am I grieving the right way? It's
right?
like, no. Like I was going to do all these things, take these courses, and then I was going to be done with this thing because I need to put that in its place. And there's a beauty in the, maybe we call it messiness, or the less planned and anticipated. So, but we also have to give each other and ourselves permission to experience those things as they come up.
Well, and beauty doesn't mean it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It can be beautiful and sad, right? So I think that people may make assumptions around what their should or could or whatever other story is going on. How do you help people with the coping idea of let that go?
One of the things that I think we have an opportunity to do when we've experienced a loss is there's a softness and a leaning into one of the best pieces of, you said, how do you help people? And I tell myself, there's a great quote that says, don't just stand there, do something. And when we're facilitating things around grief, it's don't do something, just stand there. And it's a slowing down. And the other thing is that we don't ever have to let go of memories. We don't ever have to let go of a relationship. And those things can stay with us. What we can let go of or work towards letting go of is the unrealistic expectations we have around ourselves, the expectations we have around the people around us and how they are or are not doing something in the way that we think that we should, maybe judgment. So it's really, what can we let go of so that we can hold on to the other more meaningful or important things? And letting go of judgment, especially of ourselves when we're grieving and going through a transition, can be one of the most powerful things that we can do for ourselves.
We can be our worst critics, right? And not allowing ourselves to grieve the way that we really should. And I think too, from looking at it from a perspective, if you know someone who is grieving, or how can you best support them? And I know a lot of times we get fearful. Am I going to say the right thing? How am I going to react to them? They just lost somebody. What do I say? What do I do? How can somebody help somebody who is grieving?
There are a lot of concrete ways. I think one of the best ways that we can support somebody who's grieving is approach them with curiosity and positive intention. And so if we're truly curious about what somebody's experience is like, if we're curious about ways that we can support them, that can be really, really powerful, because then it's not about what I say or what I don't say. Like, we kind of get in our heads about this. But to me, it's more of a state of being. How am I being around this person? How do you want to talk about this? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I'm curious about that. I'm curious, would it be helpful if the other thing we can do is offer choices, especially in the beginning. One of the things that people talk about being the most difficult is people will say, let me know how I can be supportive, or let me know how I can help. And I think that's really most of the time well-intentioned, because oftentimes when we've experienced a loss, words are inadequate. That's why we struggle so much with what do I say, what do I not say? What do you say to somebody who's just lost a child?
Mm-hmm. Right.
There aren't words for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so recognizing that, and then recognizing that we don't have to be wildly uncomfortable. asking ourselves, what are my strengths? My strength is not to participate in a food train. Like if I sign up to bring you dinner, you're not going to get it. So I am not the friend that does that.
DoorDash.
A lot of people are, right? What do you feel most comfortable with? What was your relationship like with this person prior to? If it wasn't a really close, intimate relationship, we don't have to expect that it will be now. But also reaching out and then reaching out again can be really helpful. I had somebody ask me, she said, gosh, I just lost my neighbor. She was a part of this monthly wine group that we would go to, but she just lost her husband. And she's like, so we weren't sure. Like, do we invite her? Do we not invite her? Like, we didn't want to invite her because maybe it was too soon, but we didn't want her to feel excluded. She was going on. And I said, why don't you ask her or tell her? We want you to still be a part of this. I'm really struggling. I want to be supportive to you. And that could open up a beautiful conversation where somebody has the opportunity to say yes or no. But also recognizing and naming what is happening can be really, really powerful.
Because often we say, I'm sorry for your loss. What can I do? And then that's not really, it's not pinpointing, like when you say sorry for your loss, but being curious about that. Like, how are you, how do you feel is kind of a broad question. So maybe there's something more deep you can ask because, well, how do you think I feel? I just lost somebody. So being more specific about your curiosity is what I'm hearing you say is just, and being present and asking pointing questions and not just broad general strokes, right?
Yeah. And I think being authentic.
Yeah.
I have a girlfriend who just lost her mom. And we went out to lunch and I said, so are we talking about her today or not?
Right.
And we have that relationship.
Sure.
But it was, so I didn't have to sit and wonder like, gosh, do I bring it up? Do I not bring it up?
Yeah.
Does she want to be distracted today and kind of feel, like all things are the same or more reflective? I didn't have to wonder about that. I just got to say, is this a day you want to talk about that?
That's a great example.
Or not?
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, to me, almost when you say, let me know how I can help, you're adding one more thing to their plate.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's just more weight to be on their shoulders because now I got to think about how you can help. And if I don't ask you to help, are you going to get mad at me?
Right.
All the things, right? And so we have to do a better job of being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right?
That's it.
And talk, just be available to have a conversation.
The other piece too is that to not take things too personally. When somebody has just experienced a loss, we're in a whirlwind. And so sometimes I'll hear people say, I texted her. She never texted me back.
It's not about you.
Yeah. And of course she didn't. All of these other transitions are happening. And so being willing to have those direct conversations with people and say, hey, I'd love for you to come to dinner. I also understand if the day comes and it doesn't feel right, please know I'm somebody that you can cancel on and we can always reschedule.
I like that. And I like presenting options too, like choices and letting them, are we going to talk about it today or not? Just, and you decide and you tell me.
And I'm here for it.
Right. Exactly.
What role does community play in the healing process?
A huge role. Grief can feel so isolating. And in that feeling of isolation, we hear people all the time say, I think I'm going crazy. I think I'm crazy. And then you watch people walk into a room and they'll share something and 10 other people will be like, yep, that happened to me too. And it's in those moments that for me, I've experienced the power of community. Because without anybody saying anything, every single person was like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. This is normal. I can see it. It's also, we are by nature communal creatures. And so being with others in a sense of community plays a huge role for our mental and physical health and our emotional well-being. And when we're grieving or have something significant happen, such as a death loss or a transition, sometimes it can feel there's an incredible amount of courage that it takes to show up to vulnerable spaces. And so having welcoming communities, having people that answer, having people that are willing to acknowledge a loss, having people who are willing to say, I know today might be hard for you, and be a part of that experience reduces that isolation so that we can heal more fully and safely.
And having that safe space, and it may be, I mean, do you see this where individuals may come to the community, but they might not say anything right out of the first meeting or the first time they come together? Is that an often experience where it might take some time to understand this is a safe space?
Absolutely. And just, I had several people, it's not uncommon for people to come to a group space, like at HeartLight, when we have peer support groups. We invite people to come, and all we ask is that people try to say their name so that we know who's in the space, and then do kind of participate in a check-in or check-out. And check-in and check-out can go like this or like this. It's just a way to communicate, like, do you need help or additional support? But we don't require anybody to say anything.
So they can just give you a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up, thumbs down means I need additional support. And if you're quiet for 90 minutes in a room full of people, that's okay. Sometimes, again, there's neurobiology that is at play here with our brains need time to remap and figure out and understand what has happened to us, especially when we lose somebody really, really close. And so it can be part of that remapping can be putting words to what happened, saying out loud, I lost my husband. And to say those words can be really difficult. So I've had people that have participated or have come to group and not said anything for maybe three sessions. And then the next session could say an introduction. And then it took over a year for somebody to be able to tell her story. And she told her story. And she said, I sat here for 3 months and I couldn't say anything. And then with time and intention and really practice for our brains and our hearts to then be able to put words to that can be powerful, but it can take time.
Do you think part of that is identifying that, you really are in a safe place to share and be vulnerable and not have, other perceptions of attack coming towards you?
I think some of it's space. I think some of it is shock too. Like I still can't believe this happened. And so to verbalize that, I just can't say it. We hear, it's common to hear stories of people that went through, veterans. People will say, gosh, he's never talked about the war. And maybe that's about feeling safe in a space. And maybe that's about because putting words to something that has happened can feel too hard. And maybe not even too hard, but in some cases, when we're talking about, really traumatic events, maybe unsafe in some ways. So it's really important that we allow people to go at a pace that feels natural to them, especially if, peers and friends and other relationships. And then if there's something that's would require the help of a clinician or a therapist, counselor, or physician, that those spaces are there too.
Do you
offer
offer
deeper traumas?
Community space for the caregivers? Do you offer that kind of resource for, maybe they haven't the anticipatory grief they're going through, but haven't had the loss, but do you have those types of resources?
We are starting that type of resource in March.
Oh, great.
We currently have a caregiver grief support group and a potluck. And then we are starting an anticipatory grief group in March. And that's really because for many years, people have asked us, and recognizing that so many people need that space to kind of come together, but then also to talk about those practical things. What can I prepare for? What can I plan for? And then who's there when things didn't go according to plan? to bounce some ideas off of and be in community together. So
That's fantastic. That's wonderful.
So I've heard that caregivers sometimes get a sense of guilt over past the grieving point, and now it's kind of like a breath of fresh air that their life no longer has that on it too. But then they feel, I shouldn't be feeling this way, right? What would you tell them when they're going through that piece of it?
I would remind them that two opposing things can happen at the same time. So you can feel like not want your person to be gone and also feel relief that you don't have the responsibility and the round-the-clock care to happen. Maybe an easier way for anybody that's had like an infant, I don't feel guilty that my kids have grown up and that I'm not feeding them every 3 hours and like not showering for 4 days and like all of those things. Yeah, but that's a very natural thing. And so it's okay to feel relief when something that was really, really hard is no longer there. And simultaneously, you can still grieve and be sad. It doesn't mean you wished your person died, or that you wished that you didn't have help. It can mean that this really hard thing stopped happening, and I still really, really wish the circumstances were different.
It's true. It's hard to get past that sometimes, though, but to be able to talk through that and understand, you're right. I'm not with that person anymore, but that person's not suffering, or, the pain that they're in and the toll that it had maybe on a relationship, because you turn over to that caregiver piece of it, and it's difficult. So that's a good point to make. Thank you.
What's the difference between grief and mourning?
So we usually think about grief as something that is an internal process and that experience. Mourning is the external expression. And so what we do with that process. So most commonly we think about mourning like at a funeral or a celebration of life, an event where we've come together to be in community, experience our feelings, our ceremonies, our rituals together in that space of mourning. And then grief is really what I take home with me in terms of how I'm feeling.
Got it.
How can families talk about grief across generations? Like, how can they start to have those conversations so that they can foster healing instead of, bundling it in or not talking about it? Like, what's the importance of having those conversations?
Sometimes we have the expectation after, like when we're grieving, that now if it's the first time in your family system that you're like, okay, we need to do this right. So maybe grandma just died and now I'm going to have the whole family come to dinner and I'm going to be like, let's talk about our feelings. And that's never one time happened before. You know what I mean?
Talk about it early on. Maybe not waiting until that time.
I'm busy that day washing my hair.
Right. So but sometimes I'll hear people be like, no, we have to do this right. And so we're going to sit down and we're going to be like, okay, so we're supposed to talk about this. If it's the first time, now is maybe not the time to start like brand new habits or relationship expectations. I think recognizing first, when we're in a family system, we know whether we like it or not, we know what our role is. And the family system, it's kind of like if you think about a mobile that hangs over a baby's crib. And so everybody has their space and they know where they are. And we're always trying to achieve balance. And then when imagine a piece of the mobile is gone, what we are going to try to do as a family system is get back into balance, but we're missing a piece. And so we want to try to figure out how do we bring back that familiarity and that balance sometimes, and we all have different reactions to that. And so, again, removing judgment can be one of the first things that can be most powerful. Is I'm not going to come into this space or judge how my family or my friends are responding to this, and replacing that with curiosity can be really helpful. So I don't have an expectation that this is what you should do and how you should do it, but I'm curious what this is like for you. That sets the stage for a very different conversation. The other piece is recognizing that we probably, if people are already sad or angry, it's bringing up a topic is not going to make them sad or angry, but it could open the door to have a conversation on how we would work through that or be most supportive for one another. And so having those courageous conversations, daring conversations, but then also allowing things to breathe. And there's maybe for in some instances, maybe this is the first time that we can collectively take a breath and then start to support one another in ways that can be most helpful in an understanding and loving way. And I say that sounds like very like rainbows and unicorns, but we never want to dismiss the fact that these circumstances can be really complex. And we come to the table with these histories, right? There's a reason you're like, no, not doing that. Because there's history and there are things that have happened. But again, replacing judgment with curiosity, I think, is probably one of the more powerful things that we can do as family members.
So having those conversations, would you say early on, more so than waiting until you're at the table and mom wants to bring up everything? You're like, no, but is it better to have those conversations earlier, or just keep stuffing it under and let's just not talk about it?
Yeah. I think honoring everybody's unique experience and preference. So when I think about my grandparents, there was no conversation that was going to be had with grandpa. And imagine if, some therapist comes in and is like, we need to have these conversations earlier and right now. He would say, no, thanks for visiting, actually, and you're welcome to leave.
Right.
Then I think about my grandmother who, like, in her 50s was like, honey, will you put Post-it notes on everything around the house that you'd like to take when I die? Yeah.
Right.
Like,
totally different.
Two totally different things. Yeah. And so in some ways, we can't force people to do things in the way that feels best for us. So it's reflecting. Now, we do know that responding versus reacting gives us control of situations, but also honoring where people are. And for some people, it's so uncomfortable to talk about that they won't. And I'm not going to say that's wrong.
Right. Everybody's different.
It's just different.
So if we had a listener in our audience that was feeling alone and not sure how to navigate this path of grief by themselves, and it's just feeling heavy and, they're just not clear, is there kind of a thought or a process that they can think of that would wrap them like a warm blanket?
I would invite them to know that they aren't alone. And they might not believe me when I say that, because it can feel so isolating, and it can feel like you're the only person that has ever experienced something like this. And in one way, you are the only person that has, because there's only one you. And there are also other people that are willing to listen and learn and share what has been helpful to them. And so when we're in those moments that can feel like they last forever or that they'll never go away, having a sense of belief or a sense of knowing that there is something bigger than you, whether that be community, faith, friendship, family, it could look different for everybody, but lean into that and do not have the courage to ask for help and support. And sometimes, especially now, we've done a really good job at creating barriers to mental health support and even physical health support sometimes. And so just knowing that there are communities, there are places to have the courage to reach out to find that connection, and the tenderness to say, this is hard. This is really, really hard. And it's awful. And we wish things were different. And that can be very real. It is very real.
Are there other programs or other events that the HeartLight Center offers? I want to make sure that we've covered everything that HeartLight Center offers, because I don't want to miss anything, because there's a lot of good going on there and offering. Was there anything that we missed or we didn't talk about that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, what I'd share about HeartLight Center is that we have online printable resources, so things people can read. We have a program called A Heart to Heart, and that's on our website, where it's one griever to another. Mm-hmm. There are poems, there are messages, there are stories, there are things, there are recipes. So just from my heart to yours, in an effort to, again, share, you're not alone, because there are pieces of me that you can probably resonate with. So we have those online resources. We also have programs, so grief support groups, guided curriculum-based groups that come with manuals and the same people each time. We have different workshops on various topics around grief. The other thing that we are really committed to doing is not being a barrier to support. And so if somebody is not seeing what they would thinking that would be helpful for them in their own path, we have a network of people that we work with to help find them the support, whether that be in person in their area or online. We really don't want to create barriers, and recognize that if people have the courage to call, even if they don't see what they're looking for from us, we will work within our network to find resources that would work for them.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and sharing and giving us your heart today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's a calling and it's a journey, and we appreciate being part of it.
Well, thanks for covering an important topic.
Sure is. Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you for sharing your wisdom, compassion, and lived experience with us today. You've reminded us that grief isn't something to fix or rush. It's something to be honored, witnessed, and supported with care.
You've also shown us that grief is not just about sadness. It can hold love, connection, growth, and meaning, and that allowing ourselves to seek support is one of the most courageous things we can do.
If today's conversation resonated with you or someone you love, you can learn more about Jen's work and the resources available through the HeartLight Center at heartlightcenter.org. We've also included links in their LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook pages in our show notes.
Because while grief may be universal, healing happens best when we don't walk it alone, and when community, presence, and understanding are part of the journey.
We're Nicole Rabalato and Tasha Beckman, and this has been another episode of the Empowered Elder Podcast, where we explore aging, life transitions, and the human experiences that connect us all.
Until next time, be gentle with yourself, stay connected, and remember, even in grief, you are not alone.